Chapter 1 Super Sunday. I never quite understood why my daddy left me. Don't get me wrong, my mom and stepdad did everything for me, but it's just something about a father's love that can't be replaced. Coming up, I had everything, but everything is nothing when your dad isn't there. I grew up loving my mom for what she could do for me, but at the same time, I hated her. I hate that she left my dad. I hated that she brought me into this life, and I hate what became of her. Everyone said Latanya and Jared were couple goals back then. Tanya was the prettiest girl in school, and Jared was the one everyone wanted. Jared was the man, a dedicated athlete, extremely handsome, and very smart. You see, my dad, Jared, was something like a big deal. He was heavily recruited by every top football school in the country. Every weekend it was a different college trip. Everyone wanted a piece of Jared love. My mom got pregnant with me in her senior year of high school. Daddy wanted to work to support his family, but everyone told him no. His family was very supportive of his NFL dream and even offered to take care of us so that my dad can focus on football. My papa was a big shot. I didn't know exactly what he did, but I knew he always had money and he always smelled good. At the last minute, my dad chose to attend LSU. My mom said that daddy was scared to go too far away from home. Since they were young parents, it wouldn't be a good idea to take a baby away from her roots anyway. Honestly, I think my dad didn't want to leave his hometown. I can't lie. It's something about New Orleans that sucks you in. Sometimes you get away, but most times you come back. LSU turned out to be a good pick, close enough that they could be near family, and the school was good enough to give my daddy the attention he needed from the NFL scouts. My dad's college career was quite successful: two conference championships and two national championships. He picked up every award but the Heisman. My daddy was projected to go top 10 in the draft. He was what they call a day one pick. Everything was like a dream. That wasn't until one day. My daddy decided to come home for Super Sunday. Super Sunday is like a holiday in New Orleans. It's a day when the Mardi Gras Indians come out and parade through the streets. Daddy came from a Mexican family, so missing Super Sunday is like missing Christmas. It doesn't happen. His dad was an Indian, his grandpa and his great grandpa all masked Indian. They belonged to one of the oldest tribes in New Orleans. Big Chief Love was loved and respected throughout the entire city. They loved him so much that there is a statue downtown of my great grandpa. For Super Sunday, the Love family usually sets up on Claiborne and Ursuline near the statue. Even though the draft will be in a few weeks, Daddy still had teams to visit before the official pick. Everyone told him not to come, but he says there was no way he would miss his dad becoming a big chief. Mom says she will never forget that day. She says she woke up feeling terrible. She was nauseous and had a headache that wouldn't go away. Despite feeling bad, there was no way my mom would leave my daddy to go to New Orleans alone on Super Sunday. Even though she was his world, she didn't want to risk another girl trying to get drafted, as they say in the gold digging world. We stopped two times for my mom to vomit, all signs that we should have turned back, but we didn't. As Dad exited at Esplanade, it looked like Mardi Gras. Cars and people were everywhere. Since they were late, they didn't make it to the lot before police closed off the streets. In New Orleans, being late to Mardi Gras and Super Sunday means you will be praying for parking and lots of walking. I remember my papa would always say on Mardi Gras Day, if we ain't out by 9, might as well catch the second line. They made it in just enough time to see my papa step out of the door. My dad wanted to be there because it was his job to hold the chief's stick, and it was his first stick as big chief. Pawpaw was known around town for having the biggest stick and crown. Pretty, pretty big chief, so pretty was his tagline. If I can remember correctly, it was probably one of my dad's best moments. Super Sunday ended up being a success. My grandpa told my parents that they should head back to Baton Rouge before it got too late. Daddy had to meet with one of the NFL teams on Monday, so staying overnight was out of the question. Since Mom was sick, she spent most of the day inside. Luckily, our uncle lives a few houses away, so she was able to rest on his sofa. Daddy didn't want me and my mom to take that walk, so he decided to get the car and come back. About 10 minutes after he left, it sounded like 40 gunshots went off. The mood instantly turned sour. My mom says all she remembers is my grandma screaming, "Where's Jay? Where's Jay?" Papa ran outside and didn't return immediately. I was young, but I'm pretty sure I remember the screams. I don't know the shooting's exact details, but the police filled us in on what they believed happened. As my dad was walking to the car, he stopped to dap off Lucky, a high school friend. About the time he was about to walk away, A vehicle spun the corner on them and started shooting. Everyone started running, but about 11 people weren't so lucky. Lucky died instantly. A lady was killed. My dad was shot up pretty badly. A few people were grazed, and a baby was run over by a car leaving the scene. What was a great day quickly turned tragic. Needless to say, we never made it back to Baton Rouge that night. Instead, we started what we thought would be our new life. Even though my dad lost out on the chance of a lifetime, he was lucky to be alive. 12 shots hit the bottom half of his body. It was almost like the killers purposely shot my dad's legs up. We later found out that Lucky was the target in the shooting. Apparently, he was behind a shooting in the night ward where some heavy hitters were killed. Lucky and whoever looked like him became targets that day. As I said, my daddy was just fortunate to be alive. Chapter 2, New Life. It seemed like the news stations couldn't get enough of the shooting. Every day it seemed like they were showing footage from my dad's football career. If he didn't feel bad about what happened, they would definitely remind him. In Baton Rouge, we lived like royalty. The entire town took care of us because they loved my dad. Baton Rouge is a football town, and the players are like celebrities. My dad was especially loved because he was so good, and he had a lovable personality. My mom and dad never worked before the shooting, but everything was taken care of. Between my pawpaw and Baton Rouge, we had it all. For a few months after the shooting, my dad would get flowers and gifts daily in the hospital. Everyone loved him and was rooting for him to recover. But for some reason, it seemed like my daddy wasn't getting better. Just a few months ago, he was on top of the world. Just a month away from being a millionaire, and everything changed. That's a lot for a young man to handle. As time went on, the gifts stopped coming. On top of that, things at home were crazy. We eventually lost our apartment in Baton Rouge, but it was for the best. We needed to be in New Orleans anyway. We needed to be close to my daddy. Mom revealed that she was pregnant with her second child. At a time where a couple should rejoice, they were unable to be even partially happy. While my dad was in the hospital, we moved in with my grandparents. They wanted us to be as comfortable as we could, given the circumstances. The house was big, and there was more than enough room for us all. Popo wanted my mom to get on her feet as best as she could, but now that she was pregnant, that seemed like something that would never happen. That year, I would be starting school, so my mom wanted a job during the day with weekends off to sit with my daddy. We didn't know how long he would be in the hospital, but we knew we would have to be there. My dad was released from the hospital 5 months later. Everyone was relieved that he was coming home, but no one knew what was to come. When my dad first got out of the hospital, he had to stay in a rehabilitation facility. We picked one in the east so he could be close enough to visit him daily. I was a daddy's girl. I don't remember everything about his recovery, but I remember seeing him daily. Daddy would always say, "Who's my favorite girl?" And I would reply, "It's me, Daddy. It's Annie." I would beg my mom and grandparents to take me to see him. It's like my day wouldn't go right without me hearing my daddy say I was his favorite girl. As mom started working more, it seemed like I stayed with my grandparents more and more. In fact, mama eventually moved away, and I would only see her on weekends. I was young and I didn't understand, but looking back, I now realized what was happening. Mom couldn't handle that new life. My dad wasn't the only one that couldn't take it. My mom was also struggling. After about 3 months in rehab, Daddy was finally able to be released. But at that point, everything was different. My mom was near her due date and living away from us. It was me, my grandparents, and my daddy. My papa was truly our lifeline. He kept us going. For a while, Daddy had to go to therapy every day. I didn't realize his injuries were that bad, but apparently relearning to walk is not easy. A year ago, he was bench pressing 200 pounds, and now he was walking with a walker. Whoever said life can change in an instant wasn't lying. I remember my daddy begging my mom to come back home. She would come around from time to time, but mostly she was away. My dad wanted to be there for her pregnancy, but she told him it would be best if he just focused on his recovery. My dad loved my mom so much that she could tell him anything and he would believe it. She convinced him that she didn't feel right living with his parents. She claimed she didn't want to be a burden and wanted to make her own money. To him, it seemed legit. Chapter 3, December 15th. December 15th is a day I will never forget. I remember after school going to the hospital because my mom was having a baby. My dad was so excited that he was about to have a son. I was his world, but adding a little prince somehow made my dad smile a little bit more. As my grandpa pulled up to the hospital, he pulled into the fire lane to help my daddy out of the car. Papa told me to stay with daddy while he looked for a parking spot. As Papa got out of the car to help daddy, he paused. My daddy and I both looked at him as if we somehow knew what was happening, but neither of us could move. Papa grabbed his head and fell onto the car. My dad was weak and could do nothing. I ran to the other side of the car and screamed at my papa. What's wrong? Papa, what's wrong? My daddy yelled, Honesty, go get some help. I remember running as fast as I can to get to the guards. The security guard called the nurses. Soon after, I saw them running with a gurney. As I tried to run back, I remember the guard grabbing me and holding me back. At that point, I was hollering and screaming, I gotta get back to my daddy. After a few minutes, I finally calmed down. I peeked through the window and partially saw the nurses working on my pawpaw. I saw my daddy on the phone and it looked like he was crying. My pawpaw actually died right in the parking lot. I can't believe that he was just here smiling and talking with us, and now he's gone. There is nothing worse than a sudden death. We had no real warning and no time to even say, I love you. It turns out that my pawpaw died from a blood vessel that popped in his head. The stress had finally gotten to him. An aneurysm had taken my pawpaw from me, and in a few hours, my baby brother would be born. This was a very stressful day. Later that night, my baby brother was born. My mom and dad decided to call him Eli after my grandpa. When we got home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling. I was young, but I knew that things would never be the same. My grandma was sick for years. She was suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. My grandpa was everyone's rock. He took care of us. But now, who's going to take care of us? I was only 5. My dad could barely walk. My mom just had a baby. And my grandma didn't even know what year we were in. Our entire team was on injured reserve, and no one had a clue where life was taking us. Chapter 4: The Funeral. My papa had one of the biggest funerals New Orleans has ever seen. My dad and his siblings all came together to ensure that the big chief went out right. Since my papa was like a celebrity, the city celebrated him with us. We turned the Treme out that week. Every day up until his funeral was a celebration. My papa was a chief for only a few months, but now he will be the big chief forever. Every Indian came out in full gear to support us. As the bands played and the dancers danced, the Indians chanted and sang all night. On the night of the funeral, I clearly remember the sky opening up. Someone put me on top of a car and I just started dancing. My feet began moving as the rain kept falling. I knew that had to be Papa. Papa knew how to steal a show, and he was working through me. After Papa's funeral, it almost seemed like things were looking better. My TD took my grandma to Atlanta to live with her. My dad was able to keep the house in the East as long as we agreed to pay the bills. My other two uncles didn't bother much with the family business. One was in Angola and the other lived in Texas. After the funeral, my uncle Tudor went back to jail and my uncle Ryan went back to Texas. Since everything was going on, my mom also decided to come back home. For the first time in months, I had my family back together. I never got the chance to fully celebrate that I was a big sister with everything going on. I was always a good little helper, but now it was my job to help my dad with his recovery and help my mama with the baby. Months went on and things finally started to get better. Mom went back to work, I went to school, and baby Eli went by my mom's cousin every day. Papa left a policy so daddy didn't have to work. Mom didn't either, but for some reason she just wanted to. Dad was getting better, but far from the man he was. Losing his career and his father in the same year was starting to weigh on him. His demeanor began to change, and it caused problems with my mom. They would fuss so much that I would go upstairs with my baby brother and turn the TV up. I wanted to drown out all of the yelling any way I could. The arguing went on for months until my mom just got tired. One day, my mom dropped me off at school like she did every day. That afternoon was different. My dad picked me up. It was weird because Tuesday was his therapy day. Why wasn't he in therapy? When we got home, I remember asking where mommy and Eli were, but daddy never answered. He just went upstairs and closed his door. The next few weeks were weird. I didn't see or hear from my mama and Eli at all. Daddy told me she went out of town and would be coming back soon. I was really daddy's helper then. Daddy was stronger, and so was I. I had been through so much within that year, but that was nothing compared to what I would be going through in the next few days. One day, I remember Daddy woke me up from school. He cooked me a big breakfast with all of my favorites. He played my favorite song on the stereo, and we danced while the food cooked. I wonder what was going on for my daddy to be making me pancakes. Pancakes were special. My daddy couldn't fool me. He had to be planning to tell me that my mom was coming back. I was so excited and happy, but I pretended that I didn't know what he was planning. I didn't want to ruin the surprise. When we got to school, Daddy made me come around to his side of the car. He gave me the biggest hug ever. I kissed him and grabbed my bags out of the car. As I turned away, I remember Daddy saying, "Who's Daddy's favorite girl?" And I said, "It's me, Annie." I blew a kiss and said, "Bye, Daddy." Daddy replied with a stern voice, "What did I tell you about saying bye?" I looked up at him with my best puppy dog eyes, and we both said it together. It's "see you later." Daddy smiled, and so did I. His dimples would make anyone melt. That whole day, I was so excited. I was anxious because I knew I would be seeing my mom and baby Eli again. My daddy could never keep a secret from me, even if he tried. After lunch was nap time, but this time it was different. Mrs. Thomas came to our classroom and asked my teacher if she could take me. Mrs. Thomas whispered something in her ear, and I saw my teacher's face change. Miss Fontenot hugged me and told me to go get my bags. Mrs. Thomas grabbed my hand and escorted me to the office. When I got there, I saw my mom. I screamed and ran to her because I was happy to see her. As I hugged her, the tears started coming down. She cried so hard that I realized it wasn't a happy cry. "What's wrong, Mommy? What's wrong? Where's my daddy?"